The stagecoach door swung open, and Wyatt Callahan's carefully ordered world shattered in an instant. He'd posted one advertisement. One. For a housekeeper. A single woman to cook and clean. What stumbled out into the blinding Montana blizzard wasn't what he'd bargained for. Clara Weston emerged first half-frozen and desperate, clutching a bundle against her chest. Then came three little girls. Three. Clinging to her skirts like she was the last solid thing in their crumbling world. The youngest one looked up at him with hollow eyes and whispered, "Mister, is this where we get to stop running?" Before we continue this journey through the snow-swept Montana frontier, I invite you to stay with us until the very end. If this story moves you, please hit that subscribe button and comment with your city so I can see just how far Clara and Wyatt's story travels. Now let's step back to where it all began. The winter of 1887 arrived in Montana territory like a judgment from God. Wyatt Callahan stood on the wide porch of his ranch house watching the sky turn the color of a fresh bruise. His breath came out in white clouds. His gray eyes tracked the distant road with the patience of a man who'd learned to wait for things he didn't want. The stagecoach was late, 3 hours late. He didn't move, didn't pace, just stood there with one shoulder against the rough-hewn post, letting the cold bite into him like penance. "Boss," Jeb Tucker's voice came from behind. "Storm's gonna hit hard. You sure about this?" "She's got my money. She'll come." "And if she don't?" Wyatt didn't answer. He'd placed that advertisement in the Helena newspaper 6 weeks ago. Housekeeper wanted. Single woman. Room and board provided. Reasonable wages. Apply in writing. Simple. Clean. Practical. He'd received 4 responses. 3 were barely literate. The 4th came from a Miss Clara Weston of Virginia, written in a careful, educated hand that spoke of either genuine refinement or desperate pretense. Her letter had been brief. She could cook, she could clean, she could manage a household. She required immediate placement and asked no questions about wages or conditions. That last part should have raised flags. People who didn't ask questions were usually running from answers. But Wyatt had been desperate too. The house had fallen into neglect since Mrs. Patterson had moved to California to live with her daughter last spring. He'd managed well enough on his own. He was a rancher, not helpless. But the accumulation of unwashed dishes, dusty corners, and meals that tasted like sawdust had finally convinced him that pride was a poor substitute for hot food and clean sheets. So he'd sent Clara Weston travel funds and instructions. She'd replied with a telegram. Arriving December 15th. Stop. Grateful for opportunity. Stop. C. Weston. Today was December 15th. The wind picked up, carrying the first flakes of what promised to be a brutal storm. In the distance, cattle lowed nervously. The horses in the barn stamped and shifted. There. Wyatt straightened. The stagecoach appeared through the curtain of white rocking violently over the frozen road. The driver was pushing the team hard, whipping them toward shelter before the full storm hit. Jeb moved to stand beside him. "Want me to?" "I got it. Get the hands inside. Make sure the animals are secured." Jeb hesitated clearly, wanting to say something more, then thought better of it and headed toward the bunkhouse. The coach clattered into the yard with considerably less dignity than it had likely left Helena with that morning. Ice caked the wheels. One window had cracked. The driver, a grizzled man Wyatt knew as Old Pete, looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 6 hours. "Callahan," Pete's voice was raw from cold. "Got your delivery, but I'm telling you straight, this ain't what your wire specified." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "Explain." "Best you see for yourself." Pete climbed down his movements stiff with cold and moved to open the passenger door. His hand paused on the handle. He looked at Wyatt with something that might have been pity. "She's got young'uns with her. 3 of 'em." The words hit Wyatt like a punch to the chest. "She what?" But Pete was already pulling open the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a woman's hand appeared, gripping the doorframe with white-knuckled intensity. The hand was small, gloveless, and blue with cold. Clara Weston stepped down. She was younger than Wyatt had expected. 25, maybe 26. Though her eyes held the kind of exhaustion that aged a person beyond years. Dark brown hair had come loose from its pins, whipping around a pale face marked by high cheekbones and a mouth set in a grim line of determination. Her dress was thin gray wool, completely inadequate for Montana winter, and she clutched a bundle against her chest that Wyatt suddenly realized was a child. A small child, wrapped in what looked like every spare piece of cloth the woman owned. Clara met his gaze directly. No apology, no shame, just raw, desperate defiance. "Mr. Callahan, I'm Clara Weston. I apologize for—" "The storm ain't the problem," Wyatt interrupted. His voice came out harsher than he'd intended. "It's the extras." Clara's composure cracked. Just for an instant he saw the terror beneath. Then her chin lifted. "They're with me. They're mine. Your letter made no mention of Mama." The small voice came from inside the coach. Then another child appeared in the doorway. A girl of about 10, all sharp angles and serious eyes. Her brown hair plastered to her face with melted snow. She clutched a smaller girl against her side, 7, maybe 8, with blonde hair and eyes so blue they seemed to glow in the dim light. Both children were shivering so hard their teeth chattered. "Mama Rose won't wake up proper." Clara's face went white. She thrust the bundle in her arms toward Wyatt. "Take her! Take her now!" Wyatt caught the child instinctively. The bundle was terrifyingly light. He pulled back the cloth and found himself looking at a little girl, no more than 4 years old, with golden curls and a face the color of old snow. Her lips were blue, her eyes were closed, but her chest still rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. "She's been like that for an hour," Clara said, her voice cracking. "I couldn't keep her warm enough. The coach, it was so cold, and I tried. Inside." Wyatt was already moving. "All of you, now." "Mr. Callahan, I know this isn't what you—" "Inside, woman. Your girl's half frozen. Arguments can wait till she ain't dying." Clara grabbed the other 2 children and followed him, stumbling through the snow that was already ankle-deep. Pete called after them. "I gotta go. Callahan storm's coming fast. Can't stay." Wyatt didn't look back. "Go. I've got him." The stagecoach rattled away into the white, and suddenly Wyatt was alone with 4 strangers. 3 of them children in a house that had been silent for 3 years. He kicked open the front door and strode through the dark main room to the fireplace. The fire had burned low while he'd been waiting on the porch. He laid the little girl Rose, they'd called her, on the rug before the hearth, and turned to find Clara already kneeling beside him. "Get her wet clothes off," he ordered. "I'll build up the fire." "I know what to do." Clara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the buttons. "Emma, help me. Lily, get under that blanket on the chair. Get warm." The older girl, Emma, dropped beside her mother and started unlacing the tiny boots with grim efficiency. Her face was pale but focused. No tears, no panic. Just the methodical movements of someone who'd learned too young that falling apart was a luxury they couldn't afford. The middle girl, Lily, didn't move toward the blanket. Instead, she pressed herself against Emma's back, her blue eyes fixed on her little sister. "Is Rose gonna die?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "No." Clara's answer was fierce, absolute. "No, baby. Rose is not going to die. Not today. Not ever. Not while I'm breathing." Wyatt built up the fire until flames roared and heat poured into the room. He grabbed quilts from the chest by the wall, quilts that had belonged to his mother that hadn't been touched in years, and brought them to Clara. "Wrap her, skin to skin if you have to. Body heat's the fastest way." Clara looked up at him, and for just a moment, the defiance cracked. He saw gratitude there. And something else. Shame, maybe. Fear of what would come after when the crisis passed and he remembered that she'd lied to him. "Thank you," she whispered. Wyatt stood and stepped back, watching as Clara stripped off the little girl's frozen dress and wrapped her in quilts, then pulled her against her own body, using her warmth to chase away the deadly cold. Emma had finished with the boots. She sat back on her heels, her small hands clenched in her lap. "She'll be all right," Emma said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A demand, as if she could make it true by refusing to consider any other outcome. "She needs to warm up slow," Wyatt said. "Too fast, and it can hurt more than help. Your mama knows what she's doing." Emma's eyes snapped to his face, assessing him the way a general might assess an enemy position. "Are you going to send us away?" The question hung in the air. Wyatt could feel Clara tense, even though she didn't look up from the child in her arms. He could feel all three of them waiting. Emma with her fierce, protective stare. Lily with her silent terror. Clara with the desperate hope she was trying so hard to hide. "Storm's too bad to send anyone anywhere," he said finally. "We'll sort the rest when your sister's out of danger." It wasn't an answer. They all knew it wasn't an answer. But it was enough. For now. The next 2 hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the howl of wind outside and the crack of logs in the fire. Wyatt made coffee. Then, because he couldn't think of what else to do, he heated up the stew he'd made that morning, tough meat and root vegetables, nothing fancy, and set out bowls for everyone. Emma ate with mechanical efficiency, her eyes never leaving Rose. Lily barely touched her food, pushing beans around the bowl until Clara gently took it from her and finished it herself. "You need to eat," Clara murmured to her middle daughter. "I know you're scared, but you need to keep your strength up." "Not hungry." Lily. "I'll eat when Rose wakes up." Clara closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, the weariness there made Wyatt's chest tighten unexpectedly. "All right," she said softly. "All right, baby." Around midnight, Rose stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. She looked up at Clara's face, then around the unfamiliar room, then at Wyatt standing by the fire. "Mama." Her voice was thin as paper. "Where are we?" Clara's laugh was half sob. "We're safe, sweetheart. We're warm and safe." "Is this the new house? The one you told us about?" Clara hesitated. Her eyes flicked to Wyatt, then away. "Yes, baby. This is the new house." "It's big." Rose's gaze found Wyatt again. "Who's the tall man?" "That's Mr. Callahan. He owns this house. He's—" Clara swallowed. "He's going to let us stay here." Wyatt didn't correct her. Didn't point out that he'd agreed to nothing promised. Nothing that every word she was telling this child might turn out to be a lie. He just stood there and watched Rose smile a small, tired, trusting smile and felt something crack in the walls he'd built around himself. "Hello, Mr. Callahan," Rose said politely. "Thank you for the warm blankets. I was very cold." "You're welcome," Wyatt heard himself say. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, rusty, like a door that hadn't been opened in years. Rose yawned hugely. "Mama, can I sleep now? I'm so tired." "Yes, baby. You sleep. I've got you." Within minutes, Rose was asleep again. Real sleep this time, her color returning, her breathing deep and even. Emma finally relaxed. Her rigid posture softened, and suddenly, she looked like what she was, a 10-year-old girl who'd been carrying too much weight for too long. "She's okay," Emma whispered. "She's really okay." "She's okay," Clara confirmed. She looked up at Wyatt. "Mr. Callahan, I know we need to talk. I know you have questions. I know I owe you." "Morning." His voice was gruff. "We'll talk in the morning. Right now everyone needs sleep." "But there's a bedroom through that door. Was my mother's. Hasn't been used in years, but the bed's good and there's quilts enough. Take the girls, get some rest." Clara stared at him. You're not going to demand an explanation tonight. Would it change anything if I did? She was quiet for a long moment. No, the truth is what it is. Then it can wait till morning. Wyatt moved to the window, looking out at the storm that had turned the world into a wall of white. Storm will blow itself out by dawn. We'll talk then. He heard her rise, heard her quiet instructions to Emma and Lily, heard the rustle of quilts as they gathered themselves for the move to the bedroom. At the threshold, Clara paused. Mr. Callahan. He didn't turn around. Thank you. For my daughter's life. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you decide. Thank you for tonight. He didn't answer. After a moment, the bedroom door closed softly behind them. Wyatt stood at the window for a long time, watching snow pile against the glass and listening to the house breathe around him, not empty anymore, not silent, but filled with the soft sounds of sleeping children and a woman who'd brought the kind of complication he'd spent 3 years trying to avoid. He should be angry. He'd been deceived. The simple arrangement he'd hoped for had just become infinitely more complicated. But all he could think about was the way Rose had smiled at him. That small, trusting smile. And the way it had reminded him of another little girl with the same golden curls who'd smiled at him that exact same way. Before the fever took her. Before it took everything. Wyatt pressed his forehead against the cold glass and closed his eyes. 3 years of silence. 3 years of building walls so high nobody could get over them. 3 years of convincing himself he was better off alone. And now there were 4 strangers in his mother's room, 3 of them children who'd looked at him like he might be either their salvation or their damnation. He didn't know which one he was going to be. He wasn't sure he wanted to find out. Morning came gray and silent, the storm having exhausted itself sometime in the small hours. Wyatt rose before dawn, as always, his body moving through its routines, regardless of how little he'd slept. He built up the fire, made coffee, and was pulling on his boots when the bedroom door opened. It wasn't Clara who emerged first. It was Emma. She moved quietly, closing the door behind her with exaggerated care so as not to wake the others. Her hair had been rebraided badly, but with obvious effort, and she'd washed her face. She looked small and determined, and far too old for her years. Mr. Callahan. Miss. She walked to the table and sat down across from where he was lacing his boots. Her hands folded in her lap, her back was straight as a soldier's. I need to talk to you before Mama wakes up. Wyatt paused. That so? Yes, sir. There are things you should know, things Mama might not tell you because she's too proud. He leaned back, studying this serious little girl with her serious old eyes. I'm listening. Emma took a deep breath. We don't have anywhere else to go. Mama's been looking for work for 8 months. Nobody wants a woman with 3 children. We've been staying in boarding houses, sometimes in church shelters, sometimes in... Her voice faltered. Sometimes places that weren't very nice. Mama's been pretending everything's fine, but we haven't had a proper meal in 2 weeks. She's been giving us her food and saying she already ate. Wyatt felt something cold settle in his stomach. Go on. Rose got sick because the last place we stayed there wasn't enough firewood. Mama tried to keep us warm with just blankets, but it wasn't enough. When she saw your advertisement, she cried. I've never seen Mama cry before. She said it was our last chance. Emma's chin lifted. So I know you're angry about her not telling you about us. I know you wanted someone without children. But please, Mr. Callahan, please don't send us away. I'll work twice as hard as any grown-up. Lily's good with animals. Rose is little, but she doesn't make trouble. We won't be burdens. I promise we won't. The girl's voice had started strong but ended in a whisper. Her hands, still folded in her lap, were trembling. Wyatt was silent for a long moment. 8 months. 8 months this woman had been struggling to keep her children alive, and she'd been too proud to mention it in her letter. Too proud or too desperate, knowing that honesty would have meant another rejection. Your mama know you're out here talking to me. No, sir. She'd be upset if she knew. She doesn't like us to beg. Is that what you're doing, begging? Emma's eyes flashed. No, sir. Begging is asking for something for nothing. I'm offering a trade. We'll work for our keep. Every one of us. All I'm asking is that you give us a chance to prove it. Despite himself, Wyatt felt his mouth twitch. How old are you, Miss Emma? 10, sir. But I've been helping Mama run households since I was 6. And the others Lily and Rose. Lily's 7. She's quiet, but she's smart. Good with her hands. Rose is 4. Emma's expression softened. Rose is still little. She needs more looking after. But she's got a good heart. She makes everyone feel better just by being there. And your papa? Where's he? The question hung in the air. Emma's face went carefully blank. Dead, sir. He and our real mama both. Died of fever 2 years ago. Wyatt went still. Your real mama? Emma's eyes widened slightly. She'd said too much. He could see her realizing it, see her calculating whether to try to cover the slip or let the truth emerge. Before she could decide, the bedroom door opened again. Clara stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes moving between Emma and Wyatt with growing alarm. Emma, what are you doing? Mama! What did you tell him? Clara's voice was sharp with fear. Emma, what did you say? She told me the truth, Wyatt said quietly. Or part of it. He stood his full height, seeming to fill the room. Now I reckon you ought to tell me the rest, starting with who you really are to these girls. The silence stretched out taut as wire. Clara's hand found the doorframe, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping her upright. In the bedroom behind her, Wyatt could hear Lily's voice, high and worried, asking what was wrong. Not in front of the children, Clara said finally. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please, Mr. Callahan, whatever you're going to do, whatever you're going to decide, not in front of them. Wyatt looked at Emma, who had gone pale and frightened, all her earlier composure crumbling. Go to your sisters, he said. Help them dress. Stay in the room till we call you. Emma looked to Clara, who nodded once jerkily. The girl slipped past her mother into the bedroom. The door closed. Clara and Wyatt stood alone in the main room with the fire crackling and the morning light turning the frost on the windows to gold. I wasn't trying to deceive you, Clara began. You left out 3 children in your letter of application. What would you call that? Survival. The word came out hard and flat. I've applied for 37 positions in 8 months, Mr. Callahan. 37. Every single one rejected me the moment they learned I came with children. Do you have any idea what that's like? Watching door after door close in your face while your girls get thinner and sicker and more afraid. So you lied. I omitted. There's a difference. Not to me, there isn't. Clara's composure cracked. She pressed her hands to her face, her shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs or might have been exhausted laughter. You're right, she said, her voice muffled. You're absolutely right. I deceived you. I came here under false pretenses. And if you want to send us away the moment the roads are clear, I have no right to argue. She dropped her hands. Her eyes were dry. Whatever tears she might have felt, she'd pushed them back down. But before you decide, you should know everything. You asked who I really am to those girls. She swallowed hard. They're my sisters, my half-sisters. We share a father. Wyatt's eyebrows rose. You're not their mother. I've been their mother for 2 years, ever since the fever took their parents. But no, I didn't give birth to them. Clara's laugh was bitter. My mother was a seamstress in Richmond. She had an affair with a married man, a wealthy man. He promised her the world, and then disappeared when she got pregnant. I'm the result. The illegitimate daughter nobody wanted to claim. She moved to the window, wrapping her arms around herself. After my mother died, I ended up in a charity home, worked my way out, found employment as a companion and governess, and by some cruel twist of fate, ended up working for my father's legitimate family. His real family, his wife and daughters. Did they know who you were? The wife did. Sarah. She was... Clara's voice softened. She was kind, genuinely kind. She said I was family whether anyone else acknowledged it or not. She treated me like a daughter, and when she fell ill she made me promise. Clara's voice broke. She made me promise I'd take care of her girls, that I'd keep them together no matter what, that I wouldn't let anyone separate them. And their father died 3 days after Sarah. The fever took them both. And when the lawyers finished picking through the estate, there was nothing left, nothing but debts and 3 little girls with no living relatives willing to take them in. Wyatt was quiet for a long moment, processing this. What about the dead man's family? Surely there's someone... There's an aunt, Sarah's sister, a woman named Margaret Blackwood. Clara's voice hardened. She visited once years ago, called Emma willful and Rose sickly, and suggested they be sent to separate boarding schools so they could be properly molded. Sarah threw her out of the house. They never spoke again. But she's blood kin. She'd have legal standing. She'd have the legal right to tear them apart. To send Emma to one institution, Lily to another, and Rose to God knows where. I won't let that happen. Clara turned to face him, her eyes blazing. I promised their mother. I promised Sarah. And I'll die before I break that promise. The words hung in the air between them, fierce and absolute. Wyatt studied this woman, this stubborn, desperate, lying woman, who'd traveled 1,000 miles through winter with 3 children and nothing but hope to sustain them. Who'd given her food to her sisters and watched them sleep in places that weren't very nice. Who'd answered his simple advertisement because it was her last chance at something like a life. Why didn't you tell me any of this in your letter? He asked finally. Would you have hired me if I had? He didn't answer. They both knew he wouldn't have. Clara nodded, accepting this. I thought if I could get here, if I could show you we weren't a burden, that we could work and contribute and not cause trouble. I thought maybe you'd let us stay. It was foolish. It was deceptive. But it was all I had. From the bedroom came the sound of Rose's high, sweet voice asking when breakfast would be ready. Emma's response low and uncertain. What happens now? Clara asked quietly. Do we wait for the roads to clear, or would you prefer we leave immediately? Wyatt turned away from her, moving to the window to look out at the white expanse of his land. Snow lay thick over everything, transforming the familiar into something strange and new. 3 years ago, he'd stood in this same spot and watched his wife and daughter being carried out to the cemetery on the hill. The fever had taken them in a single brutal week, Elizabeth first, then little Annie. He'd buried them in frozen ground and sworn he'd never let anyone close enough to hurt him like that again. The walls he'd built had been strong, impenetrable. For 3 years, nothing had gotten through. And now there were 3 little girls in his mother's bedroom and a woman with desperate eyes and fierce loyalty, and all his carefully constructed defenses suddenly felt like paper. The roads won't be clear for at least 2 days, he heard himself say. Maybe 3. I understand. We'll stay out of your way until... I didn't say you had to stay out of my way. Wyatt turned back to face her. I said the roads won't be clear for 2 days. That gives you 2 days. Clara's breath caught. 2 days for what? To prove you can do the job you applied for. Cook, clean, manage a household. The girls stay out of trouble and don't wander where they shouldn't. You show me this can work, and we'll talk about making it permanent. Hope flared in Clara's eyes, wild, desperate hope that she was clearly trying to contain. You mean... I'm not making any promises. I'm giving you a chance. 2 days. If it works out, we'll discuss terms. If it doesn't, I'll pay your way to wherever you want to go and give you references for other positions. That's... Clara's voice was thick. That's more than fair. That's more than anyone has... She stopped, pressing her lips together hard. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. You won't regret this. We'll see about that. He moved toward the door. I've got work to do. Stock to check after the storm. I'll be back for dinner at midday. I expect a hot meal and a clean kitchen." "You'll have both." He paused at the door, his hand on the latch. "And Mrs. Weston." "Miss," she corrected quietly. "I've never been married." "Miss Weston, then." He met her eyes. "If there's more you haven't told me, more secrets waiting to come out, I need to know now, before this goes any further." Clara held his gaze. "I've told you everything that matters. No other family going to come looking for those girls." Something flickered in her expression. Fear quickly suppressed. No one who has any right to them. It wasn't quite an answer. They both knew it wasn't quite an answer. But Wyatt had learned long ago that sometimes you had to accept the answers people gave you and wait for the truth to reveal itself. "2 days," he said again. And he stepped out into the cold white morning, leaving Clara alone in his house with 3 children, and whatever secret she was still holding close to her chest. Behind him, he heard the bedroom door open, heard Rose's excited voice asking if they could come out now, heard Clara's answer gentle and reassuring as she gathered her sisters for whatever came next. Wyatt walked toward the barn, his boots crunching in the fresh snow, and tried not to think about how the house had sounded different this morning. Not empty anymore, not silent, full of voices and movement and life, full of complications he'd spent 3 years avoiding. He'd given them 2 days. That was all. 2 days to prove themselves, and then everything would go back to normal. But even as he thought it, Wyatt knew he was lying to himself. Nothing about this was normal, and something told him nothing would ever be normal again. The 2 days stretched into something neither of them had anticipated. Clara attacked the house with the determination of a woman proving her worth. By the time Wyatt returned from checking the cattle that first afternoon, the kitchen had been scrubbed until the worn wood gleamed. The smell of fresh bread filled the rooms, and a pot of stew bubbled over the fire, rich with herbs she'd found dried in the pantry. He stood in the doorway, snow still clinging to his coat, and stared. "You found the herbs?" Clara looked up from the table she was wiping down. "I hope you don't mind. They were just sitting there going to waste." "Haven't touched 'em since." He stopped, cleared his throat. "Since Mrs. Patterson left." "Well, they're still good, mostly." She straightened, pushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Dinner's ready whenever you are. The girls have already eaten. I hope that's acceptable." Wyatt nodded slowly, still taking in the transformation. The windows had been cleaned, the floor swept. Even the ash had been cleared from the fireplace and the wood box restocked. "You've been busy? I told you I could manage a household. Reckon you did." He sat at the table, and Clara served him without fuss or ceremony. The stew was better than anything he'd eaten in 3 years. He didn't tell her that, but he ate 2 bowls, and she noticed. "The girls," he said, finally pushing back his empty dish. "Where are they?" "In the bedroom. I've been keeping them out of your way like you asked." "I didn't ask that." Clara's hands stilled on the dish she was washing. "You said they should stay out of trouble." "Trouble and existence ain't the same thing." Wyatt rose, moving toward the bedroom door. "They can come out, long as they understand the rules." "What rules would those be?" "Don't wander past the barn without permission. Don't go near the horses unless I'm there. Listen when an adult tells them something." He paused with his hand on the door. "And don't ask questions about things that ain't their business." Clara's expression flickered. "They're children, Mr. Callahan. Children ask questions." "Then teach 'em when to stop." He opened the door before she could respond. The 3 girls were huddled on the bed, clearly having been listening at the door. Emma's face was defiant. Lily's was watchful. Rose simply looked up at him with those big, trusting eyes and smiled. "Hello, Mr. Callahan. Your house smells like bread now. I like it." Something in Wyatt's chest contracted. "You can come out," he said gruffly. "Sit by the fire if you want. Just don't touch anything without asking." Rose scrambled off the bed immediately, her small feet hitting the floor with a thump. She grabbed her cloth doll and marched past him into the main room, with the confidence of a child who'd never learned to be afraid of large, gruff men. Lily followed more cautiously, her eyes darting between Wyatt and the escape route behind him. Emma didn't move. "Something wrong?" Wyatt asked. "I don't trust you." "Emma?" Clara's voice was sharp. "It's all right." Wyatt held up a hand. "She's got reason." He looked at the girl directly. "I haven't earned your trust yet. But I'm not asking for it. I'm asking you to give your sisters a chance to get warm by a fire that isn't going anywhere. Can you do that?" Emma studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once and slid off the bed, moving past him with the wary grace of a cat expecting to be kicked. When she was gone, Wyatt turned to find Clara watching him. "That was—" She stopped, searching for words. "That was kind." Wasn't kind, was practical. "Girl's been through enough without me making it worse. Still, thank you." Wyatt didn't answer. He just returned to the main room where Rose had already claimed the spot closest to the fire and was showing her doll the dancing flames. "Look, Molly," she was saying. "Look how pretty. We're going to be warm forever now." The words hit Wyatt harder than he'd expected. He sat heavily in his chair watching the child play, and tried not to think about another little girl who'd sat in that same spot, showing her own doll the same dancing flames. Tried not to think about how empty the house had been without her. The first day bled into the second. Clara continued her assault on years of neglect, working from dawn until well past dark. She washed curtains that hadn't been touched in years, beat rugs until clouds of dust rose like smoke, organized the pantry, and discovered supplies Wyatt had forgotten he owned. But it was the girls who surprised him most. Rose followed him everywhere. Not closely enough to be underfoot, but always within sight, always watching with those curious eyes. She asked questions constantly about the horses, the cattle, the snow, the stars, the way the wind sounded at night. "Why does the fire crackle? Why do cows have such big eyes? Why is your face so serious all the time?" That last one made him pause. He looked down at her, this tiny golden-haired creature who'd nearly died in his house 3 days ago, and found he didn't have an answer. "Don't know," he said finally. "Just is. Mama says faces tell stories. She says yours tells a sad one." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "Your mama talks too much." "She says that too." Rose grinned, entirely unaffected by his tone. "Can I pet the horses tomorrow?" The brown one looked at me through the window. "I think she wants to be friends." "We'll see." "That means maybe." "That means we'll see." Rose nodded solemnly, accepting this, and returned to her doll. Lily was different. She rarely spoke, rarely met his eyes, but Wyatt caught her watching the animals with an intensity that bordered on longing. On the second morning, he found her standing at the barn door, her breath fogging in the cold, staring at the horses like they held all the secrets of the universe. "You shouldn't be out here alone." Lily jumped, spinning around with wide eyes. "I'm sorry. I wasn't going to touch anything. I just wanted to look." "It's cold. You'll catch sick." "I don't mind the cold." She hunched her thin shoulders. "The horses don't either. They look happy here." Wyatt studied her for a moment. "You like horses?" A nod, quick and almost shy. "Your sister Clara, she said you were good with animals." Another nod, then so quietly he almost missed it. "My papa had horses, before. He taught me things." "What kind of things?" Lily's face twisted with something that looked like grief trying to become memory. "How to brush them. How to check their feet. How to tell when they're happy or scared." She paused. "The brown one is scared. She keeps looking at the door like she's waiting for something bad." Wyatt's eyebrows rose. The brown mare Bess had been nervous since a cougar had spooked the herd last month. None of the hands had figured out why she was still jumpy. "You noticed that just from watching. She holds her ears wrong, flat back sometimes even when nothing's happening, and she won't turn her back to the door." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical almost. Something scared her, She's waiting for it to come back. Cougar, Wyatt said slowly. Came through the north pasture a few weeks ago. Didn't get any of the herd, but Bess saw it. Lily nodded, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. She needs to know it's safe now, needs someone to show her. You offering? The question seemed to surprise her. She looked up at him for the first time, really looked, and Wyatt saw something in her eyes that reminded him uncomfortably of himself. A person who'd learned to be invisible because visible meant vulnerable. I could help, Lily said carefully. If you wanted, if you'd let me. Wyatt should have said no. Should have told her the horses were his responsibility, that a 7-year-old girl had no business in a working barn, that getting attached was a mistake for everyone involved. Instead, he heard himself say, tomorrow, after breakfast, you can help me brush her down. Lily's face transformed. The change was subtle. She didn't smile, didn't laugh, didn't bounce with excitement like Rose would have. But something in her eyes came alive, something that had been dead or sleeping. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Wyatt, he corrected, surprising himself. Mr. Callahan was my father. It was what he'd said to Clara that first night. But this time it felt different. This time it felt like an invitation. Emma remained the hardest to reach. She watched everything with those sharp, assessing eyes, helping Clara with the housework, caring for her sisters, never letting her guard down for a moment. She was polite when spoken to, did what she was told without complaint, and kept her thoughts locked behind a wall that Wyatt recognized because he'd built an identical one himself. On the afternoon of the second day, he found her in the corner of the main room, hunched over a worn piece of paper, writing something with a stub of pencil so short she could barely grip it. What are you working on? Emma's hand slapped down over the paper covering it. Nothing. Didn't look like nothing. It's private. Fair enough. Wyatt settled into his chair, stretching his legs toward the fire. Just curious. Don't see many young'uns who write for fun. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, I'm keeping track of things. What kind of things? Everything. She lifted her hand just enough to show him the edge of the paper. How much food we eat, how much work Mama does, whether we're being burdens or not. Wyatt's chest tightened. Why would you do that? Because someone has to. Emma's voice was flat, emotionless. Mama won't. She just works and hopes and pretends everything will be fine. But I know better. I know that people say one thing and do another. I know that promises don't mean anything. I know that we have to earn our place everywhere we go, and if we don't... She stopped, her small jaw clenching. If you don't what? If we don't, we get sent away, like always. The words hung in the air, heavy with accumulated disappointments. Wyatt was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than he'd intended. How many times? What? How many times have you been sent away? Emma's pencil had stopped moving. 6. Since Mama and Papa died. 6 different places. The longest was 3 months. The shortest was 4 days. 4 days. The woman said Rose cried too much. Said she couldn't sleep with all the noise. Emma's voice was carefully controlled, but Wyatt heard the rage underneath. Rose was having nightmares. She'd just lost her mother. But that woman didn't care. She just wanted quiet. So you left. Clara took us, found us somewhere else. Then that didn't work out either. And the next place. And the next. Emma finally looked up at him, and her eyes were old, so much older than any 10-year-old's should be. So now I keep track. I count the food. I measure the work. I make sure we're earning more than we're costing. Because if we're not... She shrugged. At least I'll know before it happens. At least I can prepare my sisters. Wyatt didn't know what to say. He thought of himself at 10, carefree and confident, certain that his parents would always be there, that the ranch would always be home, that the world was a fundamentally safe place. This girl had never known that certainty. Maybe never would. You want to know something? he said finally. Emma watched him warily. That list you're keeping, the counting, the measuring. He leaned forward, holding her gaze. It won't help. It can't protect you. Because whether you stay or go, that's not about numbers on a page. It's about whether the people around you are worth a damn or not. And are you, Emma's voice was sharp, worth a damn? Don't know yet. Still figuring that out. Wyatt sat back. But I'll tell you this. Whatever happens here, whatever I decide, it won't be because of how much food you ate or how much work Clara did. It'll be because of whether this arrangement works for everyone, including me. And that's not something you can control with a pencil and paper. Emma stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at her careful columns of numbers, her meticulous accounting of their worth. Then how do I know? She whispered. How do I know when it's safe to stop counting? Wyatt thought about his own lists, his own tallies, the walls he'd built, the distances he'd maintained, the careful accounting of emotional risk and potential loss. I'll let you know when I figure that out myself. It wasn't an answer, but Emma nodded anyway, as if she understood that some questions didn't have answers yet. That night, Clara found him on the porch. The storm had passed, leaving the sky clear and thick with stars. The temperature had dropped well below freezing, but Wyatt barely felt it. He'd spent too many nights on this porch staring at these same stars, asking them questions they never answered. The girls are asleep, Clara said, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Rose asked if you'd tell her a story tomorrow. I told her you're not much for stories. Told her right. Clara moved to stand beside him, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. Tomorrow's the end of the second day. I can count. So. She didn't look at him. What have you decided? Wyatt was silent for a long moment. He'd spent 2 days watching this woman work harder than anyone he'd ever employed, watching her children try their best to be invisible, while simultaneously yearning for a place to belong. He'd watched Lily come alive around the horses, watched Rose fill his silent house with laughter and questions and life, watched Emma struggle to protect her sisters from a world that had already hurt them too many times, and he'd watched Clara move through it all with a grace that made something in his chest ache. Stay, he heard himself say. Clara's breath caught. What? You heard me. Stay. All of you. Not as a trial. Permanent. She turned to face him, and in the starlight, he could see tears tracking down her cheeks. You mean it? I don't say things I don't mean. But why? Her voice broke. After everything, the deception, the complications, because that house has been dead for 3 years. Wyatt finally looked at her. Because I've been dead for 3 years. Going through the motions, building walls, telling myself I was better off alone. And then you 4 showed up in a blizzard and made everything loud again. Messy. Complicated. Those don't sound like good things. They're not. They're terrifying. He paused. But they're also better than the alternative. Clara was crying openly now, though she was also laughing. The two sounds tangling together in a way that made Wyatt's heart do something strange and unfamiliar. I don't know what to say. Don't have to say anything. Just do the job you came here to do. Take care of your sisters. Make this house into something other than a tomb. He looked back at the stars. And if trouble comes, the kind you're afraid of, you tell me. Understand? Whatever it is, whoever it is, you don't face it alone. Clara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion but steady. Her name is Margaret Blackwood. She's the girl's aunt, their mother's sister. She lives in Boston, and she has money and connections and lawyers. She's never wanted them, not really. But if she finds out where we are, if she decides to assert her claim— What claim? You said their parents are dead. She's blood kin. I'm not. Clara's voice wavered. In the eyes of the law, she has more right to those girls than I do, and I'm— She stopped. You're what? I'm illegitimate Wyatt. I'm nobody. A charity case who got lucky enough to find work with her own father's family. If Margaret Blackwood takes this to court, any court in this country would rule in her favor. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. That's why I've been running. That's why I didn't tell you about the girls. Because every time we settle somewhere, every time we start to hope the fear of being found. Has she looked for you? I don't know. I've moved too often to leave a trail. But she has money. She has time. And she has spite. Clara's jaw tightened. She hated that Sarah, the girl's mother, was happy. Hated that Sarah chose love over society. If Margaret takes the girls, it won't be because she wants them. It'll be because she wants to prove a point, to control them, to mold them into something Sarah never would have allowed. Then we don't let her find you. Clara laughed bitterly. It's not that simple. It can be. Wyatt turned to face her fully. This ranch is isolated. Town's 30 miles away. Nobody comes here without a reason, and I know everyone who does. You keep your head down, don't draw attention, and maybe this Blackwood woman never finds out where you went. And if she does, then we deal with it, together. The word hung in the air between them, together. Clara stared at him like he'd offered her something impossible, something she'd stopped believing in a long time ago. You don't owe us this, she whispered. You don't owe us anything. Didn't say I did. I'm not doing this because I owe you. Wyatt's voice was gruff. I'm doing it because those girls deserve a chance, and because you've earned one too, whether you believe it or not. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised them both. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, her grip uncertain. But she held on, and after a moment's hesitation, Wyatt let her. Thank you, she said, for everything. For the chance, for the honesty, for... She trailed off, shaking her head. I don't have words big enough. Don't need big words. Just need you to keep your promise. What promise? The one you made to their mother. Keep them safe. Keep them together. That's all that matters. Clara's hand tightened on his. I will. I swear it. They stood like that for a while, two broken people holding on to each other in the cold dark, neither quite willing to let go. Finally, Wyatt cleared his throat. You should get inside. Temperature's dropping. You should too. Will in a minute. Clara released his hand slowly, reluctantly. She moved toward the door, then paused. Wyatt. Yeah. The girls. She hesitated. They're starting to hope. I can see it in their eyes. Emma's still scared, still watching for the other shoe to drop. But Lily smiled. Today really smiled for the first time in months. And Rose... Clara's voice softened. Rose asked me if you could be her new papa. Something in Wyatt's chest twisted painfully. What did you tell her? I told her that wasn't a question I could answer. That it would have to be your choice if it ever happened at all. Clara met his eyes. I'm not telling you this to pressure you. I'm telling you because you should know. Whatever walls you've built, whatever distance you're trying to keep, they see through it. Children always do. She went inside before he could respond. Wyatt stood alone on the porch, staring at the closed door, feeling the weight of those words settle into his bones. Rose had asked if he could be her papa. The thought should have terrified him. 3 days ago it would have. He would have retreated further behind his walls, reinforced the distance, reminded himself of all the reasons he'd chosen to be alone. But now he could hear Rose's voice through the thin walls asking Clara for a glass of water. Could hear Emma telling her to go to sleep. Could hear Lily humming something soft and tuneless, a sound so ordinary it made his heart ache. His house wasn't silent anymore. His house was full. And for the first time in 3 years, Wyatt Callahan wasn't sure if that was a tragedy or a gift. Maybe it was both. Maybe that's what family always was, a tragedy and a gift tangled together so tightly you couldn't have one without the other. He stayed on the porch until the cold finally drove him inside, and when he passed the girls' bedroom door, he paused. Through the crack, he could see them in the dim firelight, Rose curled up with her doll Lily pressed against her back. Emma on the far side with one arm stretched protectively across both her sisters. They looked peaceful, safe. Wyatt closed his eyes, remembering another little girl who'd slept in that same room, in that same bed, with that same peaceful expression. Annie. His Annie who'd been 4 years old when the fever took her. Who'd had the same golden curls as Rose, the same trusting smile, the same habit of asking 1,000 questions before she'd even finished breakfast. He'd buried her on the hill behind the house next to her mother, and sworn he'd never let himself love anything that fragile again. But standing here now watching 3 orphaned girls sleep in his mother's bed, Wyatt realized something that terrified him more than any outlaw or cougar or winter storm. The walls were already crumbling, and he wasn't sure he wanted to rebuild them. The days that followed settled into something that felt almost like peace. Wyatt found himself waking earlier than usual, not from restlessness, but from something closer to anticipation. The house had sounds now. Clara, moving in the kitchen before dawn. The soft murmur of girls' voices through thin walls. Rose's laughter, sudden and bright, cutting through the cold morning air like sunlight. He told himself it didn't matter. Told himself he was simply adjusting to a new arrangement, nothing more. But when Rose started waiting for him on the porch each morning, her doll clutched in one hand and 100 questions ready on her tongue. Wyatt stopped pretending. Why do you go to the barn so early? Horses need feeding. Can I come? Not today. You said that yesterday. And I'll say it tomorrow too, probably. Rose's face fell, but only for a moment. She'd learned somehow that his gruffness wasn't rejection, that underneath the short answers and rough voice there was space for her. Lily gets to go to the barn. Lily's older. That's not fair. Life ain't fair. You'll figure that out soon enough. Rose considered this with the seriousness of a philosopher. Mama says life is what you make it. Your mama's smarter than me. I know. Rose grinned, entirely unashamed. But I still like you. She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, that Wyatt didn't know how to respond. He just grunted and headed for the barn, but he could feel her eyes on his back, and something warm had lodged itself in his chest that he couldn't quite name. Lily had become his shadow in the barn. She never spoke more than necessary, but her presence had a calming effect on the animals that Wyatt couldn't explain. Bess, the nervous mare, had stopped flinching at shadows. She'd even started coming to the stall door when she heard Lily's footsteps. "You've got a gift," Wyatt told her one morning, watching her work a brush along Bess's flank with gentle, confident strokes. Lily didn't look up. Papa said the same thing, before. He was right. I know. It wasn't arrogance, just quiet certainty. Animals make sense. People don't. Can't argue with that. Lily paused, her hand resting on Bess's neck. Mr. Wyatt. Just Wyatt. Wyatt. She tested the name like it was something fragile. Are we really staying for real? That's what I said, isn't it? People say things they don't mean, all the time. Wyatt set down the harness he'd been mending and turned to face her fully. Look at me, Lily. She did reluctantly, her blue eyes wary. I don't say things I don't mean. Not ever. If I tell you something, you can count on it being true. Understand? Lily studied him for a long moment, searching his face for the lie she'd been trained to expect. When she didn't find it, something in her expression shifted. Okay, she said softly. I believe you. It felt like a gift, that trust. Like something precious she was handing over for safekeeping. Wyatt nodded once and returned to his work, but his hands weren't quite steady. Emma remained the holdout. She'd stopped keeping her meticulous lists, or at least she'd stopped doing it openly, but she watched everything with those old, careful eyes. She helped Clara without complaint, cared for her sisters with fierce devotion, and treated Wyatt with a politeness that never quite warmed into acceptance. He didn't push her, couldn't blame her for her caution. She'd been burned too many times to trust easily, and nothing he could say would change that. Only time would, if they had enough of it. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The snow began to melt slowly, revealing patches of brown earth and the first stubborn hints of green. The days grew longer. The work of the ranch increased, demanding more of Wyatt's time, but he found himself rushing through tasks so he could return to the house earlier. Clara noticed. "You're back early," she said one afternoon, looking up from the bread she was kneading. "Finished early." "You've been finishing early a lot lately." He didn't answer, just hung his coat and moved to warm his hands by the fire. Rose immediately abandoned her dolls and climbed into the chair beside him, chattering about a bird she'd seen through the window. Clara watched them with an expression Wyatt couldn't read. Later, after the girls were in bed, she found him on the porch again. It had become their habit, these quiet conversations in the dark. A time for honesty that the daylight didn't allow. "You're good with them," she said, settling beside him. "Better than you think." "Don't know about that." "Rose adores you. Lily trusts you, which is practically a miracle. Even Emma's starting to soften." "Emma's got good instincts. She's right to be careful." "She's careful because she's been hurt. There's a difference." Clara pulled her shawl tighter. "She wants to trust you, Wyatt. She just doesn't know how." "She'll figure it out. Or she won't. Can't force these things." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Depends on the question." "Your wife, your daughter." She felt him tense beside her, but pressed on. The hands mentioned them. Jeb said it was fever 3 years ago. Wyatt's jaw tightened. "Jeb talks too much." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "Elizabeth." The name came out rough, rusty from disuse. Her name was Elizabeth. Annie was 4 when it took her. Clara's breath caught. "Rose's age." "Yeah." Wyatt stared out at the darkness. "Same curls too, same smile. First time Rose looked up at me with those big eyes, I thought..." He stopped shaking his head. "Doesn't matter what I thought." "It matters. It was 3 years ago. They're gone. Thinking about it doesn't bring them back." Clara reached out and covered his hand with hers. He didn't pull away. "Is that why you put walls up?" she asked softly. "Why you chose to be alone? Seemed safer. If you don't let anyone in, you can't lose them." His laugh was bitter. "Turns out that's just a different kind of losing." "What changed?" Wyatt finally looked at her. In the dim light, her face was soft, open, waiting. "You did. You and your sisters." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "You crashed into my life with your secrets and your complications, and you made it impossible to keep pretending that empty was the same as safe." Clara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Wyatt!" "I'm not good at this," he said roughly. "Don't know how to say what I mean. But you asked what changed, and that's the truth. You changed it. All of you." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he let her, feeling the warmth of her through his coat. They sat like that until the cold drove them inside, and when they parted at their separate bedroom doors, something had shifted between them. Something that felt a lot like hope. The stranger arrived on a Tuesday. Wyatt had been checking fence lines in the north pasture when Jeb came riding up, his face tight with concern. "Boss, there's a fancy carriage coming up the main road. City folk from the look of it." Wyatt's blood went cold. "How many?" "Just 2. A woman in black and a man who looks like a lawyer." Clara. He had to get to Clara. He pushed his horse hard, arriving at the house just as the carriage pulled into the yard. It was everything Jeb had described: expensive, out of place, carrying trouble in every polished inch. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was perhaps 50, dressed in black silk that screamed Boston money. Her face was sharp, handsome, rather than pretty, with eyes that assessed everything they landed on and found it wanting. Behind her came a thin man in a city suit carrying a leather case that undoubtedly held documents designed to destroy lives. Clara stood on the porch, frozen, the color draining from her face. "Hello, Clara." The woman's voice was cultured cold, dripping with false pleasantness. "Did you really think you could hide from me forever?" "Margaret." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "Mrs. Blackwood, please. We're hardly on familiar terms." Margaret's gaze swept the ranch with obvious disdain. "Though I suppose I should thank you for making yourself so easy to find. A woman matching your description, traveling with 3 young girls, answering an advertisement in the Helena paper." She smiled thinly. "Did you think no one would notice?" Wyatt swung down from his horse and positioned himself between the women. "I don't believe we've met." "Mr. Callahan, I presume." Margaret looked him over like livestock she was considering purchasing. "I'm Margaret Blackwood. Those children in your house are my nieces, and this woman has been keeping them from me illegally for nearly 2 years." "They're not yours." Clara's voice had found its strength. "They were never yours." "The law would disagree, as my lawyer, Mr. Thornton here, would be happy to explain." The thin man stepped forward, his voice oily with professional courtesy. "Miss Weston has no legal claim to those children. No adoption papers, no guardianship documents. Mrs. Blackwood, as their closest living blood relative, has every right to assume custody. I made a promise to their mother." "A promise means nothing in court." Thornton's smile was thin. "Mrs. Blackwood has already begun proceedings. We have statements from witnesses in San Antonio testifying to Miss Weston's unstable living situation, her inability to provide proper care." "That's a lie." Clara's composure cracked. "I've done everything for those girls. Everything. Including deceiving Mr. Callahan about their existence." Margaret's eyebrow rose. "Yes, we know about that too. Hardly the behavior of a responsible guardian." Wyatt had heard enough. "Get off my land." Margaret's attention shifted to him, recalculating. "Mr. Callahan, I understand this woman has wormed her way into your household, but surely you can see. I can see a woman who ignored her nieces for 2 years, suddenly showing up with a lawyer." His voice was quiet, dangerous. "I can see someone who didn't bother looking for them when they had nothing but came running the moment they found something worth taking." "That's not." "You're on my land. I'm telling you to leave. If you don't, I'll have my men escort you off. Your choice." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Thornton." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Callahan, I feel obligated to inform you that harboring these children could be considered—" "I don't care what it could be considered. This is my ranch. Those girls are under my protection. And you have exactly 1 minute to get back in that fancy carriage before I lose my patience." The standoff stretched out tense and electric. Then the front door opened. Rose came tumbling out, her face bright with excitement. "Wyatt, you're back early, Mama said." She stopped when she saw the strangers. Her eyes went wide, darting between Clara's pale face and Margaret's cold smile. "Hello, Rose." Margaret's voice had turned syrupy sweet. "Do you remember me? I'm your Aunt Margaret. I came to visit once when you were very small." Rose pressed herself against Clara's leg, her small face twisting with confusion and fear. "Mama, who is that lady?" "Nobody, sweetheart. She's nobody. Go back inside." "Actually, Rose, I'm your family." Margaret took a step forward. "Your real family, and I've come to take you home." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "But this is my home. This is where we live now." "This—" Margaret's laugh was like breaking glass. "This is a dirty ranch in the middle of nowhere. Your real home is in Boston with proper schools and proper society, and I don't want to go to Boston." Rose's voice rose to a wail. "I want to stay here. I want to stay with Mama and Wyatt." The front door opened again. Emma emerged, her face white but set with determination. She moved to stand beside Rose, one hand on her sister's shoulder. "You're not taking us anywhere," Emma said. Her voice was steady, but Wyatt could see her hands trembling. "We're not going with you." "Emma, darling, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Emma's chin lifted. You're the one who made our real mama cry. You're the one who said Lily was simple and Rose was sickly and I was too wild to ever be a proper lady. You didn't want us then. You don't get to want us now. Margaret's facade cracked for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. You impertinent little... That's enough. Wyatt's voice cut through like a blade. Mr. Thornton, get your client out of here. Now, before I forget, I'm trying to set a good example for these children. Thornton's face had gone pale. He tugged at Margaret's arm. Mrs. Blackwood, perhaps we should... I'm not leaving without those children. Yes, you are. Wyatt took a step forward, and something in his expression made both visitors take an involuntary step back. You're leaving now, and you're not coming back. If you try to set foot on this land again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. If you try to take those girls, I'll fight you in every court in this territory. And if you think your Boston money and your Boston lawyers scare me, you've got another thing coming. Margaret's face had gone purple with rage. You can't stop me. The law is on my side. Maybe, but I've got something better than the law. And what's that? Wyatt looked at Clara, at Emma, at Rose, clinging to her mother's hand. Somewhere inside the house, he knew Lily was watching through a window, too scared to come out, but too loyal to look away. His family. His to protect. I've got people worth fighting for. He turned back to Margaret. Now get off my land. I won't ask again. Thornton had Margaret by the arm, pulling her toward the carriage. We'll be back, she spat, with the sheriff, with a court order. You can't keep those children from their rightful family. I'm their rightful family. Clara's voice broke. I'm their sister. Their blood. More blood than you'll ever... She stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. Too late. Margaret had frozen halfway to the carriage. When she turned back, her expression was triumph mixed with something darker. What did you say? Clara was shaking. Nothing. I didn't... Their sister. Margaret's voice was soft, dangerous. Their sister. Of course. I always wondered why Sarah was so protective of you. Why Thomas insisted on keeping you close even when it was clearly unsuitable. Her laugh was cruel. You're his bastard, aren't you? His mistake from before the marriage. Don't call me that. Does it matter what I call you? You're illegitimate. No legal standing whatsoever. A charity case that my foolish sister took pity on. Margaret's smile was vicious. Do you really think any court would grant custody to a bastard over a legitimate blood relative? Do you really think your claim means anything at all? I raised them. Clara was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I've been their mother for 2 years. I'm the one who held them when they had nightmares, who taught them to read, who went hungry so they could eat. And I'm the one with the money, the name, and the law on my side. Margaret climbed into the carriage, her composure restored. Enjoy your last few days together, Miss Weston. Mr. Thornton will have those custody papers filed by the end of the week. The carriage pulled away, leaving silence in its wake. Rose was sobbing against Clara's leg. Emma stood rigid, her face the color of old snow. And Clara herself had crumpled, sinking to her knees on the porch, her whole body shaking with the force of her grief. Wyatt moved to her side, kneeling in the dirt beside her. Clara. She's right. Clara's voice was hollow. She's right about everything. I'm nobody. I have no claim to them. I can't... Look at me. She wouldn't. Couldn't. Wyatt took her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Look at me, Clara. Listen. She's not right. She's not right about any of it. But the law? To hell with the law. His voice was fierce. You're their mother. You're the one who's been there every day for 2 years. You're the one they love, the one they trust, the one they need. No piece of paper changes that. It changes everything in court. Then we won't let it get to court. Wyatt's jaw set. We'll find another way. I don't know what yet, but we'll find it. Together. Emma's voice came from somewhere above them, small but determined. She said she'd be back with a court order. She can try. She has lawyers, money, Power. Emma's voice cracked. What do we have? Wyatt stood, pulling Clara up with him. He looked at Emma, at Rose, still clinging to her mother at the window where Lily's pale face had appeared. We have each other, he said, and sometimes that's enough. It didn't sound like enough. They all knew it didn't sound like enough. But it was all they had, and Wyatt was going to fight for it with everything he was, even if it meant losing everything else in the process. That night, after the girls had finally cried themselves to sleep, Clara sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. I should leave, she said. Take the girls and run again. If I'm not here, she can't. No. Wyatt, you don't understand. She'll drag you into this. Your ranch, your reputation, everything you've built. I can't let you lose all that because of me. You think I care about any of that? He sat across from her, his voice rough. You think I give a damn about my reputation when those girls are upstairs scared out of their minds? You should care. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment I let you stay. Wyatt reached across the table and took her hands. It became my fight when Rose asked if I could be her papa. When Lily trusted me with Bess. When Emma stopped keeping her lists because she finally believed we weren't going to send her away. Clara's tears spilled over. I've ruined everything. You haven't ruined anything. Margaret Blackwood is trying to ruin things. She's been trying since the moment she walked onto this ranch, but she hasn't won yet. How do we stop her? She has the law on her side. Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady, certain. There's one thing that would change everything. What? Marriage. Clara's breath caught. What? If we were married, you'd be my wife. The girls would be under my protection legally. Margaret could claim blood relation all she wanted, but she couldn't easily take children from a married woman in a stable household. He held her gaze. It's not romantic. I know that. It's strategy. But it might be the only way to keep those girls safe. Clara stared at him, her mind racing. You would do that? Marry me? Give up your freedom, your future just to protect children who aren't even yours? They feel like mine. The admission came out quiet, almost surprised. I didn't expect that, didn't want it, but somewhere along the way they started to feel like mine. All three of them. Wyatt. I'm not asking for love, Clara. I'm not asking for anything you can't give. I'm asking if you'll let me help you save your family. He squeezed her hands. Will you? Clara looked at this man, this quiet, broken, fierce man who'd taken them in from a blizzard and never once made them feel like burdens, who'd taught Lily about horses and answered Rose's 1,000 questions and waited patiently for Emma to trust him, who was offering to sacrifice his own freedom for children he'd known less than a month. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Wyatt nodded once, something like relief flickering across his face. Tomorrow, then. We'll ride to town, find a preacher, make it legal before Margaret can file her papers. Tomorrow. They sat in the dark kitchen, hands clasped across the table, two people bound by desperation and hope, and something else neither of them could name. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something, and sometimes beginnings were enough. They told the girls at breakfast. Clara had barely slept, her mind racing through every possible outcome, every way this desperate plan could fail. But when morning came, and she saw her sisters gathered around the table, their faces still pale with yesterday's terror, she knew there was no other choice. We need to talk to you, she said, sitting down across from them. All three of you. Emma's expression immediately shuddered. She's coming back, isn't she? That woman. Yes. She's going to try to take you away from me. Rose's lip trembled. I don't want to go with her. She's mean. You're not going with her, sweetheart. That's what we need to talk about. Clara took a deep breath. Wyatt and I are getting married. Today. The silence that followed was absolute. Lily's eyes went wide. Emma's face cycled through confusion, suspicion, and something that might have been hope. Rose just stared, her mouth forming a small O of surprise. Married? Emma's voice was careful. Like, husband and wife, married. Yes. Why? Clara glanced at Wyatt, who stood by the fire with his arms crossed, watching the girls with that steady, patient expression she'd come to rely on. Because it will protect you, he said. If Clara and I are married, you'll be part of my family legally. It'll be harder for Mrs. Blackwood to take you away. So it's not real, Emma said flatly. It's just pretend. Just strategy. It's real enough to count in court. Wyatt's voice was gentle but firm. And that's what matters right now. Emma's jaw tightened. She looked at Clara, then at Wyatt, then back at Clara again. Do you love him? The question hung in the air, sharp and uncomfortable. Clara faltered. It's complicated, Emma. It's not complicated. Either you love him or you don't. I care about him. I trust him. I believe he'll protect us. That's not the same thing. No, Clara admitted. It's not. But sometimes it's enough. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to Wyatt. Do you love her? Wyatt met the girl's eyes without flinching. I don't know yet. But I know I'm not willing to let anyone take you three away. And I know that means something even if I can't put the right name on it. Emma studied him with those old, careful eyes. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. Okay, she said. If it keeps us together, okay. Rose had been bouncing in her seat, unable to contain herself any longer. Does this mean Wyatt's going to be our papa? Clara's heart clenched. Rose, it's not that simple. He can be if he wants. Rose turned to Wyatt with that devastating directness only children possess. Do you want to be our papa? Wyatt's throat worked. For a moment he couldn't speak. I want to be whatever you need me to be, he said finally. If that's papa, then yes. If that's something else, that's fine too. Rose considered this gravely. Then she slid off her chair, walked across the room, and wrapped her small arms around Wyatt's waist. I want you to be my papa, she said into his shirt. I've wanted that since the first night, when you held me by the fire and I was so cold, and you made me warm again. Wyatt's hand came up to rest on her golden curls, and Clara saw something crack open in his expression, something he'd kept locked away for 3 years. Then that's what I'll be, he said quietly, if you'll have me. Rose looked up at him with shining eyes. Promise? Promise. Lily had been silent through all of this, watching with that intense, observant gaze. Now she rose from her chair and walked to stand beside Rose. Me too, she said softly. If that's okay. I'd like you to be my papa too. Wyatt's hand moved to include her, resting on her shoulder. It's more than okay. All eyes turned to Emma. She remained seated, her face unreadable, her fingers twisted together in her lap, the weight of too many disappointments pressed down on her shoulders, visible even in the rigid line of her spine. Emma, Clara said gently. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. Emma's voice was tight. That's the point. I don't have to do anything. Not anymore. We're not begging for scraps. We're not trying to earn our place. She looked at Wyatt and her eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. You said that. You said it wasn't about lists and counting. I did. Did you mean it? Every word. Emma rose slowly. She walked toward him with measured steps, stopping just out of reach. My real papa died, she said. He was good and kind, and he loved us, and he died anyway. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't call you papa, not yet, maybe not ever. It feels like betraying him. I understand. But I can call you something else, if you want. What's that? Emma's chin lifted. I can call you Wyatt. And I can mean it, really mean it, not just say it because I'm supposed to." Wyatt nodded solemnly. "I'd be honored." For a moment, they just looked at each other. The gruff rancher and the too old little girl, understanding passing between them in a way that didn't need words. Then Emma stepped forward and let him pull her into the embrace with her sisters. Clara watched them, her heart so full it hurt, and let herself believe just for a moment that everything might actually be okay. The wedding took place that afternoon in the small church at the edge of town. Reverend Miller was a practical man who'd seen enough frontier marriages to know that love was a luxury most couldn't afford. He asked few questions, accepted Wyatt's coin and Clara's signature, and performed the ceremony with efficient brevity. "Do you, Wyatt Callahan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Clara Weston, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara looked at Wyatt standing before her in his cleanest shirt, with his dark hair combed back and his gray eyes steady on hers. This wasn't how she'd imagined her wedding. This wasn't the love story she'd dreamed of as a girl. But it was real. It was protection. It was hope. "I do." The Reverend pronounced them married, and Wyatt leaned forward to press a brief, chaste kiss to her forehead. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't passionate. But it was gentle, and it was honest. And Clara felt something settle in her chest that had been restless for a very long time. The girls had watched the ceremony from the front pew. Rose was practically vibrating with excitement. Lily clutched her sister's hand with quiet intensity. Emma sat straight-backed and solemn, but when Clara turned to face them as Mrs. Callahan, she saw something new in the girl's expression. Not quite trust. Not yet, but the beginning of it. Jeb and two of the ranch hands had served as witnesses. They congratulated the newlyweds with gruff sincerity, and Mrs. Henderson from the general store, who'd somehow gotten wind of the ceremony, pressed a small bouquet of dried wildflowers into Clara's hands. "Welcome to the territory, Mrs. Callahan," she said warmly. "We're glad to have you." Mrs. Callahan. The name felt strange in Clara's ears, like clothes that didn't quite fit yet. But she smiled and thanked Mrs. Henderson and let herself imagine a future where it might start to feel natural. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Rose fell asleep against Clara's shoulder, exhausted by excitement. Lily sat pressed against Emma, both girls lost in their own thoughts. Wyatt drove the wagon in silence, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Are you regretting it already?" Clara asked softly, low enough that the girls wouldn't hear. "No." His answer was immediate. "Just thinking." "About what? About what comes next?" He glanced at her briefly. "Margaret won't stop. This marriage buys us time, but it won't end her claim." "I know. She'll bring lawyers. Maybe a judge from Boston if she can manage it. Someone who owes her favors who'll rule in her favor regardless of what's right. I know that too. So we need more than just a marriage license. We need the town on our side. We need witnesses who will testify that those girls are happy here, that you're a good mother, that this is where they belong." Clara nodded slowly. "How do we do that?" "We live. Openly. Let people see us. Let them see the girls thriving. Let them see that we're a real family, not just a legal convenience." Wyatt's grip tightened on the reins. "And we prepare for a fight. Because it's coming whether we want it or not." That night, Clara stood in Wyatt's bedroom, suddenly uncertain. They were married now. This was supposed to be their wedding night. But nothing about their situation was supposed to be, and she didn't know what he expected. "I can sleep in the girls' room," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If you'd prefer." Wyatt was sitting on the edge of the bed, pulling off his boots. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. "Is that what you want?" "I want to not make this harder than it has to be." He was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and crossed to where she stood frozen by the door. "Clara." His voice was gentle. "I didn't marry you to get something from you. I married you to protect your family, Our family. That doesn't change just because there's a bet involved. But you can stay or go. Your choice. Either way, I'll be here in the morning and we'll face whatever's coming together. He paused. That's what this marriage is. Partnership. Nothing more, nothing less. Unless... He stopped himself. Unless what? Wyatt shook his head. Nothing. It doesn't matter. Tell me. He met her eyes and something vulnerable flickered in his expression. Unless someday you want it to be more. But that's not a requirement. It's not even an expectation. It's just... He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with his own inability to articulate. I'm not good at this, Clara. I don't know the right words. You're doing fine. I'm doing terrible. What I'm trying to say is that you're safe here. In every way. I'm not going to pressure you or demand things you're not ready to give. We'll figure this out as we go, same as everything else. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. You keep saying things like that. Like what? Like you actually mean them. That's because I do. She moved toward him without fully deciding to stopping close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. No one's ever treated me like this before. Like I matter. Like what I want matters. Then everyone you've known before was a damn fool. A watery laugh escaped her. Maybe. No, maybe about it. They stood there in the dim light, close but not touching the air between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. I'll stay, Clara said finally. If you're sure. I'm sure. Then I'll stay. They slept on opposite sides of the bed that night, carefully separated by a foot of empty space. But sometime in the small hours, Clara woke to find Wyatt's hand resting near hers close enough that their fingers almost touched. She didn't pull away, and neither did he. The weeks that followed were a study in waiting. Clara threw herself into the work of making the house a home, cooking and cleaning and organizing with fierce determination. The girls settled into routines, Rose chattering constantly, Lily spending hours in the barn with the horses, Emma slowly, cautiously beginning to unbend. Wyatt watched it all with quiet satisfaction, returning from his ranch work each day to a house that smelled of bread and soap and something else, something that felt dangerously close to happiness. But underneath the domestic peace tension coiled like a rattlesnake waiting to strike. Margaret Blackwood had not been idle. The first sign came 3 weeks after the wedding, when Sheriff Burke rode out to the ranch with a grim expression. Got a telegram from Boston, he said, accepting the coffee Clara offered, but not drinking it. Mrs. Blackwood's filed for custody in territorial court, hearings set for next month. Clara's hand trembled on her own cup. On what grounds? Says the children are being held by an unfit guardian. That you misrepresented yourself to Mr. Callahan, that you have no legal standing as their family, and that their proper place is with blood relatives who can provide appropriate care and education. That's a lie. I'm their sister. Half-sister, the sheriff corrected gently. Illegitimate. Legally speaking, you've got no more claim than a stranger. Wyatt's jaw tightened. She's my wife now. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for plenty. A married woman in a stable household is a far cry from a single woman drifting from place to place. But Mrs. Blackwood's lawyer is arguing that the marriage was fraudulent, that you only married Mrs. Callahan to circumvent the custody proceedings. That's not true. Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if a judge believes it. Sheriff Burke finally took a sip of his coffee. Look, I'm not here to take sides. I'm here to let you know what's coming and give you time to prepare. You need a lawyer. A good one. Someone who knows territorial law and isn't afraid of Boston money. You know someone like that? The sheriff hesitated. There's a woman in Helena, Margaret Chen. She's Chinese, which means half the territory won't hire her, but she's the smartest legal mind I've ever encountered. If anyone can help you, she can. A woman lawyer? Don't let that fool you. She's won cases against men twice her age with half her scruples, and she hates bullies. Sheriff Burke set down his empty cup. I'll send word you're coming, but don't wait too long. Margaret Blackwood isn't the patient type. After the sheriff left, Clara sat at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. We knew this was coming, Wyatt said quietly. Knowing and facing are different things. We'll face it together. That's what I promised. Clara looked up at him, this man who'd upended his entire life for children who weren't his for a woman he barely knew. Why do you keep doing this? Doing what? Standing by us, fighting for us. You could walk away. You could tell the judge it was all a mistake, that I deceived you, that you want nothing to do with this mess. No one would blame you. Wyatt moved to sit across from her, taking her hands in his. His palms were rough, calloused from years of hard work, but his grip was gentle. 3 years ago, I buried my wife and daughter on the hill behind this house. I stood at their graves and swore I'd never let myself care about anyone again. Never let anyone close enough to hurt me. His voice was rough with emotion. And then you showed up in a blizzard with 3 scared little girls, and you made me break every promise I'd made to myself. Wyatt, I'm not done. He squeezed her hands. I watched Lily come alive around those horses. Watched Emma start to trust again. Watched Rose fill this house with more life and laughter than it's known in years. And I watched you fight for them every single day, never asking for anything, never expecting help, just loving them with everything you had. Clara's tears spilled over, tracking down her cheeks. That's why I keep fighting, Wyatt said. Because you showed me what it looks like to love something so much you'd die for it. Because you reminded me what I'd forgotten, that some things are worth the risk, even when losing them might destroy you. He reached up to wipe her tears with his thumb. I'm not walking away, Clara. Not now. Not ever. She broke, then really broke the walls she'd built to survive, crumbling under the weight of his words. She fell forward against his chest and wept, and he held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring quiet reassurances into the top of her head. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and swollen, but something in her eyes had changed. I think I'm falling in love with you, she whispered. Wyatt's breath caught. Clara, you don't have to say it back. I know this isn't that kind of marriage. I know we agreed it was just strategy, just protection. But I can't help what I feel, and I'm tired of pretending. He kissed her, not on the forehead, not chaste and brotherly. He kissed her like a man kissing the woman he loved, deep and desperate and real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara stared at him with wide eyes. I think I'm falling in love with you too, he said roughly. Have been since the first night, if I'm honest. Just took me a while to admit it. Why didn't you say something? Because I was scared. Because losing Elizabeth and Annie nearly killed me, and the thought of losing you... He shook his head. But I'm more scared of not having you at all. So I'm saying it now. Whatever happens with Margaret Blackwood, whatever happens in that courtroom, we face it together, as a family, as... He hesitated. As husband and wife. For real this time. Clara pulled him close and kissed him again, and this time neither of them held back. In the bedroom, through the half-open door, 3 pairs of eyes watched. Rose was grinning so wide it looked like her face might split. Lily's expression was soft, hopeful. Even Emma was smiling, a small, tentative thing that transformed her serious face into something almost radiant. They're kissing, Rose whispered loudly. Shh, Emma hissed. Don't ruin it. But they're kissing like real married people. That's because they are real married people, dummy. Don't call me dummy. Then stop stating the obvious. Lily just watched in silence, her hand pressed to her heart, and let herself believe for the first time since her parents died that maybe happy endings weren't just things that happened in stories. The month before the hearing passed too quickly. Margaret Chen arrived from Helena, a small woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She spent 3 days interviewing everyone, Clara, Wyatt, the girls, the ranch hands, even neighbors from town who'd come to know the family. Your case isn't hopeless, she told them on the 3rd evening. But it's not easy either. Mrs. Blackwood has money connections, and the law technically on her side. What we have is the truth and the testimony of people who've seen this family together. Is that enough? Clara asked. It depends on the judge. Margaret shuffled through her papers. Judge Harrison is fair, but he's traditional. He believes in blood ties. We need to convince him that sometimes blood isn't what makes a family. How do we do that? Margaret looked at her with those sharp, assessing eyes. We tell your story. All of it. The poverty, the struggle, the love you've poured into these girls when no one else would have them. We show him what kind of life they'll have here versus what kind of life they'll have with a woman who ignored them for 2 years and only wants them now to prove a point. And the girls, Wyatt asked. Will they have to testify? Probably. The judge will want to hear from them directly. Clara's face went pale. They're children. Emma's only 10. Rose is 4. I know, but their voices might be the most powerful thing we have. Children know when they're loved. They know when they're safe. If they can tell the judge that in their own words. Margaret shrugged. It might make all the difference. The night before the hearing, Clara found Emma sitting alone on the porch, staring at the stars. Can't sleep? Clara asked, settling beside her. Thinking too much. About tomorrow. About everything. Emma pulled her knees to her chest. What if it doesn't work? What if she takes us? Then we'll fight. We'll appeal. We'll do whatever it takes. What if that's not enough? Clara was quiet for a moment. Then we'll find another way. I promised your mother I'd keep you together, Emma. I'm not breaking that promise, no matter what. But what if you can't keep it? What if they separate us? What if I never see Lily and Rose again? The terror in her voice was raw, stripped of all pretense. This was the real Emma, the frightened little girl hiding behind walls of practicality and caution. Clara pulled her close. Listen to me. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever any judge decides, you are my sister. Not half-sister, not almost sister. My sister. And I will spend every day of my life fighting to keep us together. Do you understand? Emma's arms came up to grip Clara tight. I'm scared. I know, baby. I'm scared too. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose Wyatt and the horses and this house that finally feels like home. You won't. I won't let you. Promise. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of that word, knowing she might not be able to keep it. Promise. She said anyway. Because sometimes promises were all you had. And sometimes you had to make them even when you weren't sure you could keep them. Wyatt found them there an hour later, both asleep against each other, Clara's arm wrapped protectively around Emma's shoulders. He carried Emma inside and laid her in bed, then lifted Clara and carried her to their room. I can walk, she murmured sleepily. I know. Let me do this anyway. She didn't argue, just tucked her head against his shoulder and let him carry her. When he laid her on the bed, she caught his hand. Stay with me. Always. He climbed in beside her, pulling her close, and they held each other through the long hours of darkness, while dawn crept closer, bringing with it the day that would decide their fate. Whatever came tomorrow, they would face it together, as a family, as husband and wife, for real this time. The courtroom was smaller than Clara had imagined. She'd pictured something grand imposing a place where the weight of law would crush anyone who dared challenge it. Instead, she found wooden benches worn smooth by years of use, windows that let in pale morning light, and a judge's bench that looked more tired than intimidating. But the people inside made up for the room's modesty. Margaret Blackwood sat at the front, dressed in black silk that probably cost more than everything Clara owned combined. Her lawyer, Thornton, shuffled papers with the confidence of a man who'd already won. Behind them, 3 well-dressed strangers sat with matching expressions of cultivated disdain, witnesses from Boston, no doubt brought to testify to Margaret's impeccable character. Clara's hands trembled in her lap. Wyatt's hand found hers and squeezed. "We're going to be fine," he murmured. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. The girls sat behind them with Jeb, who'd insisted on coming, despite having no official role. Rose was unusually quiet, clutching her doll with white-knuckled intensity. Lily pressed against Emma's side, her face pale. Emma sat straight-backed and rigid, her eyes fixed on Margaret Blackwood, with an expression that was half terror, half defiance. Margaret Chen sat beside Clara, her documents organized with military precision. She'd been calm all morning, reassuring, but Clara had seen the tightness around her eyes when she'd reviewed the opposing counsel's witness list. "All rise." Judge Harrison entered, a man in his 60s with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He settled into his chair with the weariness of someone who'd seen too many family disputes, too many children caught between adults who should have known better. "Be seated." He shuffled through papers. "We're here today to determine custody of 3 minor children, Emma Lilly and Rose Hartwell. Petitioner is Mrs. Margaret Blackwood of Boston, represented by Mr. James Thornton. Respondent is Mrs. Clara Callahan, represented by Miss Margaret Chen." His gaze swept the courtroom. "I'll hear opening statements. Mr. Thornton, you may proceed." Thornton rose with practiced ease. "Your Honor, this case is simple. 3 innocent children have been effectively kidnapped by a woman with no legal right to them. Mrs. Blackwood is their aunt, their closest living blood relative. A woman of impeccable standing who can provide these girls with education, opportunity, and proper society. Miss Weston, excuse me. Mrs. Callahan is an illegitimate daughter of the children's father with no legal connection to them whatsoever. She took them without authorization, fled across multiple states to avoid detection, and only recently entered into a hasty marriage in an obvious attempt to circumvent these proceedings." He paused for effect. "The law is clear, Your Honor. Blood relation takes precedence. Mrs. Blackwood has both the legal right and the moral obligation to raise her sister's children in the manner they deserve. We ask that you grant her full custody immediately." Clara felt sick. When he put it like that, it sounded so reasonable, so logical, so damning. Margaret Chen rose slowly, her calm demeanor a striking contrast to Thornton's theatrical confidence. "Your Honor, my colleague speaks of law and blood relation. Let me speak of truth. The truth is that Margaret Blackwood ignored these children for their entire lives. She visited once 5 years ago and left after insulting their mother and calling the children unsuitable. She made no attempt to contact them after their parents' death. She provided no support during the 2 years Mrs. Callahan spent caring for them alone. She only appeared when she learned they'd found stability, happiness, and a loving home." Margaret Chen's voice remained even, but her words carried weight. "The truth is that Clara Callahan is these children's sister. Not half-sister, not illegitimate connection sister. She was raised alongside them by their mother, who treated her as a daughter and entrusted her with their care on her deathbed. She has sacrificed everything for them. Her comfort, her security, her future. She went hungry so they could eat. She worked herself to exhaustion so they could have shelter. She loved them with a devotion that most blood relatives never achieve." She turned to face the judge directly. "Your Honor, we're not asking you to ignore the law. We're asking you to remember what the law is for protecting children. These girls are thriving. They're loved. They're safe. Removing them from the only mother they've known to place them with a stranger who's shown no genuine interest in their welfare would be cruel and traumatic. We ask that you consider what's truly best for these children, not what's technically legal for their aunt." Judge Harrison's expression remained unreadable. "Thank you, counselors. We'll begin with witnesses. Mr. Thornton." The next 2 hours were torture. Thornton called his Boston witnesses one by one. They testified to Margaret's charitable works, her social standing, her beautiful home with rooms already prepared for the girls. They spoke of the schools waiting for them, the opportunities they'd have, the proper upbringing they deserved. When asked about Margaret's relationship with the children, they grew vague. "Mrs. Blackwood speaks of them often," one said. She's deeply concerned for their welfare. But has she met them? Margaret Chen asked during cross-examination. Once, I believe, several years ago. And she's maintained regular contact since then, letters, gifts. The witness shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Blackwood is a busy woman. I'll take that as a no. Margaret Blackwood herself took the stand with regal composure. She spoke of family obligation, of her sister's memory, of her duty to provide these poor orphaned children with the life they deserved. And why did you wait 2 years to pursue custody? Margaret Chen asked. I didn't know where they were. Clara Weston deliberately hid them from me. But you knew they existed. You knew they'd been orphaned. I assumed they were being cared for. I had no reason to believe— No reason. Margaret Chen's voice sharpened. Their parents died leaving nothing. No money, no property, no provisions. Did you make any effort to find out what happened to them? Margaret Blackwood's composure flickered. I was grieving my sister. For 2 years. Grief doesn't follow a schedule, Miss Chen. Neither does love, Mrs. Blackwood. And in 2 years of supposed grief, you never once tried to find your sister's children. That's not— Thank you. No further questions. When Clara took the stand, her legs barely held her. She told her story. All of it. The charity home, the years of struggle finding her father's family, and being treated as something shameful and hidden. Sarah's kindness. The promise she'd made. The desperate months after the fever, trying to keep 3 children alive with nothing but determination and love. Did you deceive Mr. Callahan about the children? Margaret Chen asked. Yes. Clara's voice was steady, despite her fear. I didn't tell him about them in my letter. I knew if I did, he'd reject me like everyone else had. I thought if I could show him first, prove we weren't a burden. And what happened when he discovered the truth? He let us stay. He gave us a chance. Clara's voice caught. He became our family. Margaret Chen nodded. Your witness, Mr. Thornton. Thornton rose like a shark scenting blood. Mrs. Callahan, you admit you deceived your husband to gain access to his home. I admit I didn't tell him everything, yes. And you've deceived others. Haven't you, boarding houses employers, anyone who might have helped those children if they'd known the truth? I did what I had to do to keep them safe. By lying, by hiding, by running. Thornton's voice dripped with contempt. What kind of example does that set for 3 impressionable young girls? The example that family is worth fighting for, that love doesn't give up just because things get hard. Love? Thornton laughed. You're not their mother, Mrs. Callahan. You're their father's illegitimate mistake. You have no legal right to them, no biological connection that counts, and no business raising children when a proper family is available. I have every right. Clara's voice rose with sudden fire. I was there when they were born. I held them when they cried. I taught them to read, bandaged their scrapes, sang them to sleep. I watched their mother die and promised her I'd protect them. That makes me their mother in every way that matters. In your opinion, in theirs. Clara looked directly at the judge. Ask them. Ask them who their mother is. Ask them where they want to be. They're the ones who matter here. Not me, not Mrs. Blackwood, them. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Harrison leaned forward. Miss Chen, do you intend to call the children as witnesses? We do, Your Honor, starting with Emma Hartwell. Emma walked to the witness stand with her chin high and her shoulders straight. She looked impossibly small in the big wooden chair, but her eyes were steady. Emma, Margaret Chen said gently, can you tell the court about your life with Mrs. Callahan? She takes care of us. Emma's voice was clear. She makes sure we have food and clothes and a warm place to sleep. She teaches us things, reads to us, holds us when we're scared. And Mr. Callahan, he's teaching me about horses, about the ranch. He answers my questions even when I ask too many. A tiny smile flickered. He's not very good at talking about feelings, but he shows us instead. He shows us every day that we matter. Do you want to stay with them? Yes? And if the court decided you should go with Mrs. Blackwood instead? Emma's expression hardened. I'd run away. I'd take my sisters and I'd run, and I'd keep running until we found our way back, because that ranch is our home. Clara is our mother. And nobody— Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. Nobody gets to take that away from us. Not anymore. Thornton's cross-examination was brief and brutal. Emma, you're 10 years old. Do you really think you know what's best for you? I know what's worst for me. Emma's eyes met his without flinching. I know what it feels like to be sent away. To be told you're a burden. To watch your sisters cry because another family doesn't want them. I know what it's like to have nothing and no one. Her voice dropped. And I know what it feels like to finally have a home. You can't tell me that's not real just because I'm young. Thornton had no response. Lily testified next, her voice barely above a whisper, but her words crystal clear. I like the horses, she said when asked about her life at the ranch. Wyatt lets me help with them. He says I have a gift. She paused. No one ever said I had a gift before. They usually say I'm too quiet, too strange. But Wyatt says different isn't bad. He says different is just different. Do you want to stay with him and Mrs. Callahan? Lily nodded. They make me feel safe. Not scared safe like waiting for something bad. Real safe. Like nothing bad can get us. When Rose took the stand, Clara had to grip Wyatt's hand to keep from breaking down. Rose was so small, so young. She clutched her doll against her chest and looked around the courtroom with wide, uncertain eyes. Rose? Margaret Chen said softly, do you know why we're here today? The mean lady wants to take us away. Rose's lip trembled. But I don't want to go with her. I want to stay with Mama and Papa Wyatt. Papa Wyatt. That's what I call him, because he's my papa now. Rose looked at Wyatt with absolute certainty. He said so. He promised. And what did he promise? That we could stay forever, that we were his family, that nothing was going to take us away. Rose's small face crumpled. He promised. Grown-ups aren't supposed to break promises. The courtroom was utterly silent. Judge Harrison leaned forward. Rose, if you could choose where to live, where would you choose home? The word came out instantly. With Mama and Papa Wyatt and the horses, and my room with the window where I can see the stars. I like it there. I feel happy there. Her tears spilled over. Please don't make us leave. Please. We'll be good. We'll be so good. Just let us stay. Clara couldn't hold back anymore. She rose from her seat, ignoring the bailiff's protest, and went to her baby sister. It's okay, sweetheart. She gathered Rose in her arms. It's okay. I've got you. Rose buried her face against Clara's shoulder and sobbed. Judge Harrison watched them for a long moment. Then he looked at Margaret Blackwood sitting rigid in her seat, her face carefully blank. Mrs. Blackwood, he said slowly, I have a question for you. Margaret straightened. Of course, Your Honor. That little girl just testified that she's happy, that she feels safe, that she loves the family she's found. He paused. Do you have any reason to believe she's lying? Children don't always know what's best for them. That's not what I asked. Do you believe she's lying about being happy? Margaret's jaw tightened. No, I don't believe she's lying. Then help me understand something. If this child is happy, if she's safe, if she's loved, why are you trying to take her away from that? The question hung in the air like a blade. Because it's my right, Margaret said finally. Because they're my blood. Because my sister would have wanted— Your sister entrusted them to Clara. Judge Harrison interrupted. On her deathbed. That's been established. She wasn't in her right mind. The fever— Mrs. Blackwood. The judge's voice had gone cold. I've been on this bench for 23 years. I've seen a lot of custody disputes. I've seen parents fight for children they love, and parents fight for children they just want to control. I've learned to tell the difference." He leaned back in his chair. "This isn't about those girls' welfare. This is about winning, about proving a point, about punishing Clara Callahan for having the audacity to love children you couldn't be bothered to remember existed." "Your Honor," Thornton started. "I'm not finished." Judge Harrison's gaze never left Margaret. "Those children testified that they're happy, that they're safe, that they have a home and a family and everything children need. They testified that they want to stay. That's 3 separate voices, 3 separate hearts, all saying the same thing." He shook his head. "The law gives weight to blood relation, but it gives more weight to the best interests of the child. And in this case, those interests are clear." He picked up his gavel. "I hereby deny Mrs. Blackwood's petition for custody. Legal guardianship of Emma Lilly and Rose Hartwell is granted to Clara and Wyatt Callahan with full parental rights and responsibilities." The words didn't register at first. Clara stood frozen. Rose, still in her arms, unable to process what she'd heard. Then Wyatt was beside her, his arms coming around both of them, his voice rough in her ear. "We won. Clara, we won." She turned to look at him, and his face blurred through her tears. "We won. We won." Behind them, Emma made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Lily had pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jeb was grinning like a fool, slapping his hat against his leg. And Margaret Blackwood sat motionless in her seat, her perfect composure finally shattered her face, contorted with disbelief and fury. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll appeal. I'll take this to every court in the country. You can't, Mrs. Blackwood." Judge Harrison's voice cut through her rage. "You are welcome to pursue legal remedies. But I warn you, if you attempt to harass this family, if you try to interfere with these children's stability, in any way, I will personally ensure that you face consequences. Am I clear?" Margaret's mouth opened and closed. Then, with visible effort, she gathered herself and swept out of the courtroom, Thornton trailing behind her. She didn't look back. Clara watched her go and felt nothing. No anger, no triumph. Just overwhelming, bone-deep relief. It was over. It was finally over. Wyatt's hand found hers. "Let's go home." Home. The word had never sounded so sweet. The ride back to the ranch was different from any ride before. Rose had fallen asleep against Clara's shoulder, exhausted by emotion. Lily sat with her head on Emma's lap, a small smile playing at her lips. Emma herself looked lighter somehow, as if a weight she'd been carrying for years had finally lifted. Clara leaned against Wyatt, feeling his solid warmth beside her, and let herself breathe for the first time in what felt like forever. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For fighting for us. For not giving up. For—" She struggled to find words big enough. "For everything. You don't have to thank me." His arm tightened around her. "You're my family, all of you. Fighting for you is just what you do for family." The ranch came into view, and Clara felt her heart swell at the sight of it. The house that had seemed so intimidating the first night now looked like exactly what it was: home. Jeb and the hands had ridden ahead. When the wagon pulled into the yard, they were waiting, broad grins on their weathered faces. "Welcome back, Mrs. Callahan," Jeb said, tipping his hat. "Reckon you'll be staying a while." Clara laughed, really laughed, for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Reckon I will." That night, after the girls were in bed, Clara and Wyatt stood on the porch together. The stars spread overhead, brilliant and endless, and the air was cold enough to make their breath visible, but Clara barely felt it. "I keep waiting to wake up," she said. "Waiting for something to go wrong." "Nothing's going wrong." Wyatt pulled her close. "Not anymore." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I've spent 3 years waiting for things to go wrong, hiding from anything that might hurt. And you know what I learned." He looked down at her, his gray eyes soft in the starlight. "Things go wrong whether you're hiding or not. The only thing you get to choose is whether you're alone when they do. Clara reached up to touch his face. I love you. I know we started this as strategy as protection, but somewhere along the way. She shook her head. I love you, Wyatt Callahan. Really love you. I know. He kissed her forehead. I love you too. Been trying not to say it because I didn't want to scare you, but I'm tired of not saying things. Then don't stop. I love you. He kissed her cheek. I love your courage. Her other cheek. I love your stubbornness. Her nose. I love the way you fight for what matters. Her lips soft and lingering. I love that you made this house feel like home again. Clara melted into him, and for a long moment they just held each other, two broken people who'd found something worth being whole for. Mama. They pulled apart to find Rose standing in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her doll clutched against her chest. What is it? Sweetheart, bad dream? No. Good dream. Rose padded across the porch to them, and Wyatt scooped her up without hesitation. I dreamed we were all together, forever and ever, and nobody was trying to take us away. That's not a dream anymore, Wyatt said. That's real. Rose considered this with sleepy seriousness. Promise? Promise. She nodded satisfied and tucked her head against his shoulder. Within moments, she was asleep again. Clara watched them, her husband holding her baby sister, like she was the most precious thing in the world, and felt something settle in her chest. Something that had been restless her entire life, always waiting for the next rejection, the next loss, the next time she'd have to run. That restlessness was gone. In its place was peace. Wyatt caught her watching and smiled. What? Nothing. Just looking at my family. Your family. He tested the words. I like the sound of that. So do I. They went inside together, Rose still asleep in Wyatt's arms. He carried her to the girls' room and laid her gently beside her sisters. Emma stirred her eyes, opening just enough to register that everything was okay before drifting closed again. Lily shifted to make room, her arm coming up automatically to wrap around Rose. Clara stood in the doorway watching them sleep and felt her heart overflow. These were her sisters, her daughters, her family, and no one was ever taking them away again. Wyatt's hand found the small of her back. Come to bed. She took one last look at the girls, then let him lead her away. Their bedroom was warm, the fire banked low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Clara changed into her nightgown while Wyatt pulled off his boots, and they climbed into bed together, not on opposite sides this time, but tangled together in the middle, holding on like they'd never let go. Tomorrow, Wyatt murmured against her hair, we start building, really building, not just surviving, but living. What do you mean? I mean the girls need proper schooling, the house needs repairs, the ranch needs expanding if it's going to support all of us. He pulled back to look at her. I mean, we've been so focused on fighting that we haven't had time to plan. Now we do. Clara smiled. Are you asking me to help you make plans, Wyatt Callahan? I'm asking you to help me build a life, Clara Callahan. He kissed her softly. One that's worth living. One those girls will be proud to inherit. One we can be proud to leave behind. Yes. She didn't have to think about it. Yes to all of it. He smiled, and it transformed his usually stern face into something beautiful. Good. Now get some sleep. We've got a lot of work to do. Clara closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat steady against her cheek, and let herself drift. Outside, the Montana winter stretched on cold and white and endless. But inside this house, inside this family, there was nothing but warmth. Spring would come, the snow would melt, the land would wake up and demand tending, and they would be there to tend it. Together. Not because they had to. Not because they had no other choice. Because this was where they belonged. Because this was home. Clara's last thought before sleep claimed her was of Rose's words from earlier, forever and ever. It wasn't a dream anymore. It was real. It was theirs. And nothing was ever taking it away. The end of Clara and Wyatt's story wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. A foundation laid in desperation and fear, built stronger by love and commitment, and cemented by a truth that no court order could create and no legal challenge could destroy. Some families are born. Some are made. The best ones are chosen. And on a ranch in Montana Territory in the winter of 1887, 4 lost souls had chosen each other. That choice would define their lives. It would shape their children. It would echo through generations. Because in the end, family isn't about blood or law or what society says is proper. Family is about showing up, fighting through. Holding on when letting go would be easier. Family is about love that doesn't give up. And that kind of love, that fierce, stubborn, impossible love, that's the only thing that really matters. That's the only thing that lasts.